Are you a free man? Or have you been shackled by unseen, hidden chains? Greetings, mortals. I'm your host, Simon. Welcome back to the Library of Gnosis. In today's broadcast, I will be exploring the topic of taxation. So, what is taxation? According to Oxford Dictionary, taxation is defined as a compulsory contribution to state revenue levied by the government on workers' income and business profits, or added to the cost of some goods, services, and transactions. I would like to highlight the compulsory nature of this so-called agreement. Can you even call it an agreement if it is not voluntary? The word compulsory obfuscates the true nature of the crime. If you do not pay your taxes, the government will come after you. Men wearing blue suits with pistols on their hip will come to your door to kidnap you for not paying your taxes. If you try and resist your own kidnapping, they will apply deadly force, up to and including killing you in the process. But they will not be charged for any crime for doing so. Such is the nature of government. It makes exclusions for itself. You cannot extort your neighbor at gunpoint. That would be a armed robbery. But the government can extort you at gunpoint without facing any of the same charges. But this is simply the most obvious way of taxation. The state also generates revenue through more occult means. Imagine that instead of directly stealing money from you, they simply make the money you own worth less. This is what economists call inflation. Once again, we'll look to the Oxford Dictionary for definition. It is defined as a general increase in prices and a fall in the purchasing value of money. There are some shocking examples of hyperinflation in both the past and the present. An example from the past would be the hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic between 1921 and 1923. Early in 1922, the German Hypermark, the currency of the Weimar Republic, was valued at around 200 marks to the US dollar. By November 1923, that figure had risen to 4.3 trillion. Overnight, everyone's life savings had disappeared. It got so bad that the German Hyperinflation was used as wallpaper. To pay for the large cost of the ongoing First World War, Germany suspended the gold standard, the convertibility of its currency to gold, when the war broke out. German Emperor Wilhelm II and the German Parliament decided unanimously to fund the war entirely by borrowing. The government believed that it would be able to pay off the debt by winning the war. This tragedy failed when Germany lost the war. The new Weimar Republic was saddled with a massive war debt that it could not afford. That was worsened by the fact that it was printing money without economic resources to back it up, which led to the hyperinflation. By getting rid of the gold standard, the government had gotten the ability to print money at will without any restrictions. They had created a fiat currency. Fiat money is a currency without intrinsic value, often by government regulation. Fiat money does not have, quote, use value, and has value only because the government maintains its value, or because parties engaging in exchange agrees on its value. This was one of the factors that led to the downfall of Rome. By debasing their precious metals coins with other cheaper metals. During the reigns of the Roman emperors, the currency was debased in order to supply a demand for more coinage. By debasing the currency, the coinage lost its, quote, intrinsic value. It was now only a representative of silver or gold. By the time of the Roman Emperor Claudius II, Gnosis, 268 to 270 AD, the amount of silver in a supposedly 95% Roman silver denarius was only 0.02%. Inflation is one of the most treacherous forms of taxation due to its concealed nature. It punishes the working class while unjustly rewarding those richest in society. By receiving newly printed money first, the elites of society are able to spend it at the same market rate as before, until all the newly printed money eventually floods the markets, leading to a market correction in the value of said currency, the value in the working class's purchasing power, and eating away at their life savings and pensions. Inflation, in short, is actually a form of hidden taxation. Taxation is actually a form of slavery. When your very survival requires that you acquire money, you are left with no choice but to work and pay taxes, or else get arrested. Even if you wanted to survive as a hermit, completely self-sustaining without any external parties, you would likewise be forced to still pay taxes, land and property taxes on your occupied land, for example. Otherwise, you are arrested for tax evasion, and you already know the possible outcome of that interaction. You cannot choose to pay your taxes, but you are instead forced to hand over the results of your labor at the threat of force. Precisely like conventional slavery, just a few steps removed. But that is not slavery, some of you might say. A slave owns nothing of what he produces. Well, if you're a slave, when you are forced to hand over all of your income to an authority, when are you not a slave? Are you not a slave if the state takes 99% of your earnings? 80%? 50%? Where do you draw the line? My view, and quite frankly, the logical one, is that as long as you are forced to give your income to any authority, you are a slave. No free man should be forced to pay for anything by the threat of force. As long as someone can point a pistol at you and tell you to, quote, pay your fair share, you are a slave. Taxation is justified on the basis of democracy, or as I like to call it, mob rule. There is no excuse. Theft and extortion does not become moral simply because the majority wants it. The collective is made up out of individuals. No labels must obscure this basic fact. If the individual is not free, then the collective is not free. The majority opinion should hold no sway over individual rights. The individual is the smallest minority, the minority of one. All actions come from the individual, all thoughts as well. Yet, in our society, the individual has few rights, while the metaphorical collective, which I might add is not a real thing, has all the rights. Rights which are imposed on the individual. There are negative and positive rights. Negative rights or negative freedom means freedom from something. Your negative right imposes a negative duty on others, meaning a duty to do nothing and not to interfere. My negative freedom requires only that you respect the right by not preventing me in doing it. Examples of negative rights are the right to live, to be free, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from violence, freedom from slavery, and finally, property rights. Positive rights or positive freedoms means freedoms to something. Thus, your positive right places a positive duty on others, i.e., a duty to offer something or act in a certain way. My positive right requires you to respect it by complying with it. Examples of positive rights are the rights to free schooling, free healthcare, a job, or a minimum wage. Negative and positive rights are totally incompatible. Negative rights are the freedom from force, whereas positive rights are something imposed upon the individual. To have so-called, quote, free schooling or healthcare, you will need to use the police's guns to collect taxes. You will need to extort money from the individual to pay for these so-called, quote, free projects. But what about the freeloaders, I hear you say? We need to make taxation mandatory so people won't abuse the system. Well, guess what? That's already happened. Except it's multi-billion-dollar corporations and banks and various financial systems that are abusing the system, free-rolling on the backs of the common man. Isn't it funny that it is the richest people in the world who runs government. Oh, and isn't it funny that the government has all the guns? But you see, you get something out of your taxes. It goes to healthcare and food stamps and education. Well, any cattle owner knows to keep their cattle alive, don't they? I wonder if cows could contemplate their existence. Would the cow thank its former for giving it healthcare, shelter and food, as it is led into the slaughterhouse? There are no cattle to tax if we're all dead or dying. The cattle will follow those who feed them, even if it is the same ones that slaughters them. This has been my view on taxation, one of the greatest threats to humanity. Thank you for listening. See you next time, mortal. Remember to hit that bell button to stay notified. Subscribe for more. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. And please feel free to share it. If you want to support my work, you can find me on Patreon at Library of Gnosis. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, and Bitchute at Library of Gnosis. The audio versions of my broadcasts are available on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast at Library of Gnosis. Music is produced by Coda from coded.music.